Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host Umar Khalid. But today is Friday, the 16th of December 2022, and these are the stories that we will be discussing in detail during the course of the show. We will begin, ladies and gentlemen, with the latest as far as the Indian nexus on terrorism, whether it be within India or across India, in Pakistan, and other countries is concerned. I'd like to refer to what S. Jaishankar, who's the Indian Minister of Foreign Affairs, he talked about Pakistan perpetuating terrorism and sheltering Osama bin Laden, as a result of which there was a very strong rebuke by our Foreign Minister Bhutto Zardari Sahab, who said that I would like to remind Mr. Jaishankar that Osama bin Laden is dead, but the butcher of Gujarat lives, quote unquote, and he is the Prime Minister of India. He was, of course, talking at the United Nations, a briefing room on Thursday. This is going to be our first segment, the terror nexus that India is perpetuating across the border in Pakistan, trying to destabilize Pakistan and then pointing fingers at Pakistan. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns Pakistan's flood victims that need international assistance immediately. This has been said by the United Nations on Thursday. That has also said that emergency food aid for devastated flood-hit communities in Pakistan is going to run out in the month of January, that is next month, after a funding appeal received only 1/3 of its target. In fact, there were 2 funding appeals and both did not achieve their targets. Also, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said that resilient reconstruction of flood-hit areas in Pakistan was his top priority, and he reaffirmed the full support of the United Nations for the ongoing humanitarian work in the country. He was talking to Foreign Minister Bhutto Zardari Sahab. Of course, he has also been to Pakistan and witnessed the effects, the devastation caused by the floods firsthand. This is going to be our second segment, ladies and gentlemen. Then our third story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns a new World Bank report that highlights that substantial air pollution flows across borders in South Asia are based on a flood direction, and that striving for clean air pollution and public health in South Asia report also talks about the air pollution that is wreaking havoc in different areas of Pakistan and this region, that is the subcontinent. Then we are going to talk about Twitter. On Thursday evening, suddenly suspended several high-profile journalists to cover the platform, and Elon Musk, one of the richest people in the world, who acquired the company just a few months ago. Also, this is in the whole wake of the so-called restructuring of Twitter under the chairmanship of Elon Musk, who's bought this social media platform. A lot of questions are being raised as to why these journalists' accounts were suspended. Finally, we are going to talk about another alleged audio leak that has come out from Bushra Bibi, the spouse of former Prime Minister Imran Khan, in which she is allegedly, we can hear her grumbling at Bani Gala's administrator for taking photos of Tosha Khana gifts. This is a huge also issue that has come out as far as the PTI leader is concerned, the Tosha Khana gifts and the alleged misappropriation of these gifts that is under scrutiny, not only by the judiciary but also by different quarters across Pakistan. This is going to be our last story. Let's begin with our first segment, and that concerns the terror nexus that is being perpetrated by India across the border in Pakistan, and at the same time fingers are being pointed at Pakistan at whichever pretext India tries to find. Now, S. Jaishankar, who is the Indian Foreign Affairs Minister, has said that in Pakistan was perpetrating terrorism and sheltering Osama bin Laden. As a result, there was a huge and very strong rebuke by Foreign Minister Bhutto Zardari Sahab. Let's watch the report and we'll return with more on this.
The regional reprobate India has been using terrorism to destabilize Pakistan and is jeopardizing peace and stability of entire region. Foreign Minister Bhutto Zardari, in a press briefing after he hosted the ministerial conference of G77 plus China, prized the media of a dossier issued by Pakistan containing pieces of evidence of Indian involvement in Johor town bombing in 2021. Condemning India's role in stoking terrorism in Pakistan, the foreign minister said that terrorist elements in Pakistan are getting support from the neighboring country. Earlier, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs Hinara Banikar called upon the international community and United Nations to hold India accountable for perpetrating terrorism in the country with undeniable and indisputable evidence available. Addressing a press briefing on the dossier regarding India's involvement in terrorism in Pakistan, Hinara Banikar apprised that repeated terror incidents reflect India's persistent hostility and use of terrorist proxies against the country. Contrary to India, Pakistan always remained at the forefront of fighting terrorism, and Pakistan has incessantly urged the international community to help Pakistan combat and go after those who backed, supported, financed and facilitated terrorism in Pakistan.
India has been facilitating terrorism in Pakistan, destabilizing Pakistan in whichever way possible, not since now but since decades. To talk more about this terror nexus coming from and originating from India, we've been joined by Lieutenant General retired Raza Khan, who's a defense analyst. Sir, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, for decades, Pakistan has been burning as far as terrorism and its after effects are concerned. We have seen the burning of shrines. We have seen the burning of different other areas across Pakistan. We have also waged two important wars against terrorists. We have also seen a spy who has been caught in Balochistan. The list of terror nexus that originates from India is a very, very, very long list. I had just to narrate all of that. We'll take the entire show. But nevertheless, how can India play the victim of terrorism when it is the perpetrator? Here I am referring to what S. Jaishankar had to say at the United Nations.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think India has no locus standi actually lecture the world about terrorism, and India is actually adopting a policy of using terrorism as a tool, to destabilize other countries, including Pakistan. And look, it started as back as 1948 when one of the RSS follower, Nathuram Godse, he was a terrorist and he actually assassinated Mr. Gandhi. And today, the followers of the RSS ideology, they have turned Godse into a hero, and he's being portrayed as a patriot, and statues and temples are being raised in his name, and essentially, to garner votes. Go back, I think, now to 1971, when 100,000 Mukti Bani terrorists were trained inside India, and they were used by India in support of the 300,000 Indian troops which invaded East Pakistan. And then come to the APS incident. Most of the terrorists, they've been killed. They came from Afghanistan. They were assisted, helped, and supported by India. The Johor Town incident is also there in front of us. The history of history of foreign affairs has
Raza Khan Saab, the Johor Town incident of 2021, all the other incidents that you've narrated, and there's a whole huge list of other incidents alongside these incidents that you've just talked about. What is India trying to achieve?
Well, I think right now, unfortunately, they are only interested in perpetuating their rule. And that is based on the hatred of all Muslims, as the foreign minister stated at the UN Security Council, particularly their own Indian Muslim citizens and the Muslims of Pakistan. So I think the OIC needs to take a note of that. Coming back, to the Johor Town bombing, now the dossier which has been prepared and shared with the media says that the countries of Libya, Bahrain, and even a few others were used to fund these terrorists inside Pakistan. So the FATF Secretariat should take a note of this on itself, or this dossier now must be sent to them so that, instead of now declaring Pakistan on the grey list, they should put India on the blacklist. And of course, with that, I think the Indian efforts to sabotage the CPEC and to destabilize Balochistan is there. They are very, very serious provocations. And, such kinds of aggressions, it cannot be done at the lower level. I'm sure it has been sanctioned at the highest level, at the level of the Indian Prime Minister and at the level of the Raw Chief. Therefore, I think they need to be taken to the International Criminal Court by the government of Pakistan And I think the United Nations Security Council, they need to designate them as terrorists. And I think Pakistan and all its friends must do all that it can so that this is done, and they are dissuaded from undertaking more terrorism activities inside Pakistan.
Now, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab at the United Nations has rebuked to what S. Jaishankar, the Indian foreign minister, had to say, and pointing fingers at Pakistan as a terrorist state. When very ably, quote unquote, Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Sahab said that the butcher of Gujarat is now the Prime Minister of India. He also said, quote unquote, that today India is the epicenter of terrorism and has its fingerprints over a lot of activities in the region and beyond. I'm sure, and I'm also sure that you know that the powers that be across the world know and recognize India's terrorist activities not only within India but across the border. What will persuade them to take the necessary action?
I think they should not wait any longer because if these incidents continue, then obviously, Pakistan will reserve the right to respond as it deemed appropriate, either, in a defensive mode, which it is doing, and or even in an offensive mode. And when I'm talking of an offensive mode, then I think we have the rights to go after their training camps, wherever they are, whether they are, in Afghanistan or in other neighboring countries, and particularly the mechanism of financing the terrorism, whether it is in Dubai or in Bahrain or other countries. And the government of Pakistan needs to take up this matter with the government of the UAE and the government of Bahrain to sensitize them about how India is misusing these countries. Similarly, I think we need to now be more cognizant of how the Wagah border is being misused and have more vigilance on the flights coming from Bahrain, Dubai, and even India. And of course, with that, we have to improve the national action plan and the provincial action plans and fund them appropriately.
Now, Raza Khan Sahab, also, if you remember well, when it comes to Islamophobia, it was revealed some time back that it was India that was behind most of the major sites that highlight, Muslims as being terrorists. And this is not the only thing. We also know how there is a deliberate attempt from the Indian side to malign the Muslims, whether they be in India or they be across the world. What needs to be done in order to also counter such attacks by India, not only against the Muslims in India or Pakistan, but Muslims across the world?
You see, the OIC had a plan of having, an OIC media channel. I don't know what is happening to that, but I think Pakistan needs to push for now putting that plan into actions so that all these aspects are, first of all, I think the OIC countries, the people there, they are informed through that channel. At the same time, I think all our embassies in the 57 OIC countries, they need to, I think, write in the op-eds of the important papers there. They need to inform the OIC countries. They need also, they need to influence their opinions in favor of supporting and protecting and defending first the Muslims of India and the Muslims of Kashmir, and then Muslims in general from the hate philosophy of the Indian government. So these are some of the steps, and of course there is the role of the United Nations Security Council. I think they have been trying to dodge them from designating many Indian terrorists. And I think Pakistan needs to pursue that as well. And I think inside Pakistan, the courts, I think, needs to show no leniencies to such terrorists, their facilitators, their sympathizers, and I think stern action should be taken by the courts, whether they are the normal courts or they are the anti-terrorist courts or they are the military courts. So I think put together these things along with the role of the civil society is very important. The
That is
people
so
of
true. I
Pakistan.
think that the role of many factors are important, whether it be the civil society, whether it be the national organizations, whether it be the OIC, the United Nations, or even important countries in the global north. I think the need to tell India that enough is enough, and India needs to stop its terror nexus, that it has enlarged beyond its control, and which is going beyond India, in Pakistan and other countries as well. As Hina Rabbani Khasaba also said, that India is the biggest perpetrator of terrorism and is operating as a rogue state. Thank you very much, Lieutenant General Raza Muhammad Khan Saab, defense analyst, who have joined us, to have talked to us about this very important topic, and that is the India terror nexus. Let's come to our second segment, and that concerns the post-flood rehabilitation as far as the floods that happened in Pakistan is concerned, but more of that after this short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and let's revert now to our second segment, and that concerns the post-flood rehabilitation. There is a report by the Asian Development Bank that talks about Pakistan's outlook for the fiscal year 2023 and says that the floods have weighed down this very outlook for our country. At the same time, there have been pledges that were made by the United Nations, but those pledges were not met with properly, and that is why the United Nations also weighs down a lot of issues concerning Pakistan in the year to come, because there are not enough funds for Pakistan to counter the effects of flood and all those who've been affected by the flood. More in the following report.
Floods in Pakistan had affected 33 million, left hundreds of people dead, and inflicted more than $30 billion loss to the country's agriculture, industry, infrastructure, and livestock. Pakistan spearheaded robust climate diplomacy at COP27 climate summit in Egypt, demanding establishment of fund to help countries recover from damage caused by climate disasters. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has been urging the world community to stand up and take practical measures to deal with the issue of climate change. The United Nations has apprised that emergency food aid for devastated flood-hit communities in Pakistan would run out in January after a funding appeal received only a third of its target. The United Nations had appealed more than $816 million, but said its agencies and other NGOs have only received $262 million from international donors. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has emphasized that resilient reconstruction of flood-hit areas in Pakistan is his top priority, as he reaffirmed full support of UN for ongoing humanitarian work in the country. The International Conference on Climate Resilient Pakistan will be held in Geneva on January the 9th to mobilize the global community's support towards building back better. Pakistan has been enlisted higher in rankings of nations vulnerable to extreme weather caused by climate change, but is responsible for less than 1% of global greenhouse gases.
Umar Farooq, policy analyst, joins us in the studios to talk about the flood rehabilitation and the concerns that the United Nations had shown as far as the victims of the flood in Pakistan are concerned. Umar, when it comes to the United Nations, if you remember, well, the last appeal that it had made was for $816 million, but what it received at the end of the day was $262 million. Why is there such a huge gap between what they had requested for and what they eventually got?
So the problem with any crisis these days is that whenever a crisis happens, like the floods happened in Pakistan, the world tends to move on from countries like us very quickly.
But why?
Pakistan has not been taken up as a priority by global actors the way that it deserves to be. We're a country of 30 to 40 million people. But in policy circles, we are lumped together with the Central Asian states sometimes with Afghanistan, sometimes with Iran. We do not get the same kind of treatment that we need. For instance, India is an economy which is a continent unto itself, so we can't be put together with them. We're in this very unique sort of a position where we have had friendships and enmities with everybody around us. So because of the hot and cold relationship Pakistan has had with the West. Pakistan is, in fact, it has had troubles even with China. So the options that we have are very limited. Pakistan currently is not in, it has not been able to successfully get its point across, even though the world has seen the devastation. Everyone knows.
But when it comes to putting the your point across, I think this is my point of view as well, that our leaders, whether it be Shehbaz Sharif Saab or Bilawal Bhutto Zardari Saab or Shahid Rahman Sahiba, whether it be at the United Nations or at COP27, I think they very forcefully put Pakistan's point of view across as far as the climate justice is concerned, as far as the funds for climate affected countries are concerned. But why is the reaction not coming? You're saying that there are priorities that the West has as far as different issues across the world is concerned. Pakistan does not seem to be one of the priorities. But when the United Nations World Food Programme Director, Chris Kay, says that it's going to run out of funds for Pakistan on the 15th of January, shouldn't this be a cause of concern for the West, for seeing countries such as Pakistan going through devastations post-flood, which Pakistan is not a perpetrator of? I mean, it is emitting less than 1% of carbon emission.
This should ring alarm bells in all Western capitals. This is not just a humanitarian issue. Again, this is something which can very quickly become a security issue as well. In two of our Western provinces, we are seeing the resurgence of a law and order problem, rising incidents of terrorism, cross-border violence. In the two Eastern provinces, so there are only 4 provinces, we have the floods, we have the devastated economy. Now, if we put 2 and 2 together, those disaffected, hungry people taking up weapons, that's a very real possibility. We have tens of thousands of people in Sindh who are still in this winter living under the open sky. There's no food, no clean drinking water, no medication, nothing. We do not have...
People have gone below the poverty line. There are scores of people who have gone below the poverty line because of the floods.
More than 9 million. More than 9 million people are going to go below the absolute poverty line, and food security is becoming more and more of a concern. This was something which was unheard of in Pakistan. The basic right to survival, the right to have enough food. So we were all moving towards a situation where we were looking forward towards development, towards growth. But now the clock is being pushed back. Pakistan is being pushed back into a subsistence economy. 9 million people going into absolute poverty. The foreign currency crisis is so severe that the Ministry of Defense is having difficulty importing defense-related material. So if the basic defense of the country, be it food security, economic security, or lastly, downright military security, all of these things are under threat because we do not have the dollars needed to feed ourselves, to fuel our power stations, to run our cars, and lastly, even to use our weaponry that we have. So,
but Omar, coming to food and food insecurity and the lack of proper facilities to help all the millions of people who have been affected by the floods, what can be done to avert a humanitarian crisis from erupting in the months to come?
So currently Pakistan is being drowned in more and more debt. We've recently signed an agreement with the Asian Development Bank for about $500 million. Pakistan has to come up with this money. We are kicking the can down the road. We will have to eventually pay these bills. Pakistan needs relief on the scale that we got post-2001. We need relief in terms of the interest payments that we owe to creditors, international creditors, both in the West and in the East. We're not asking for haircuts. We've never asked for people to write our loans off. We've never asked for even money itself, not for the sake of money, just to service existing debts. Pakistan, in fact, the IMF program, if we could fully implement it, mandates a 0.5% primary budget surplus. That is, 0.5% of GDP would be surplus. The only deficit would be to pay off the existing debts. So basically a balanced budget. If Pakistan did not, currently debt servicing is more than the military. It's more than 40% of our budget. and it is straining the country's resources. Climate change, coupled with law and order, coupled with the global economy slowing down, coupled with rising terrorism, this is becoming a perfect storm in 2023. And this is something which cannot be ignored.
When the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres says that post a flood rebuilding in Pakistan is his top priority, do you feel his voice is being listened to by the quarters that are important?
No. Honestly, the appeals of the United Nations, even they themselves were not massive appeals in terms of, if you look at the level of devastation and the funds requested, they're very small. $860 million for 33 million people. That's $50 per person. But even that hasn't come. We've only gotten 262 million. And over 6 months, so if you look at, that's $20 million a month for 33 million people. That is not enough for one meal a day. Forget about reconstruction or rehabilitation or anything else. This is not enough money to feed people, much less to anything.
So what about the key donors? What about the development institutions, private sector? How important is their contribution now in these current circumstances for a country like Pakistan?
Pakistan's biggest problem being debt servicing. What domestically companies can help the government with is that the domestic debt, the policy rate is 16%. So that is in fact the biggest drain on the national budget. If big banks, big commercial banks, they want to help the country out, they can unload some of their profits and help the government out with that. 16%, it has crowded out private sector investment. No one can take a loan at 16%, only the government can. It has burdened the government itself. So domestically, I believe the biggest source of relief we can have is from the banks, from the financial institutions that the government is borrowing from.
What kind of strategy, in your point of view, should the government follow now under these current circumstances, with the aid as announced by the United Nations not coming in the amount that it is needed to, with the concerns that are being shown by the by different quarters under the ambit of the United Nations, and by all that the 33 million plus people who've been affected by the floods are going through because of these floods? What should be Pakistan's strategy internally and externally?
So Pakistan has, there has been good news. We're off of the FATF list. We can and we should attract investment, foreign direct investment, not loans. We are an economy which is ripe for innovation. We've only had this year $350 million in startup funding. So the Pakistani technology sector, conventional industry, they are all ripe for investment. The only reason it doesn't happen on a massive scale is that, one, we haven't been able to brand ourselves properly. The Indians have. Their slogan, Incredible India, they have managed to turn India into this exotic destination, even though the reality on the ground is very different. Women are not safe, minorities are not safe, there is massive mob violence. The man who is responsible for more than 2,000 deaths is their prime minister. In spite of all of these facts, which are public knowledge, people are still turning to India. People are going there as tourists. They're getting harassed, but they still keep coming because their branding is very strong. In Pakistan, on the other hand, we have not had major incidents of foreigners, foreign investors being harassed, tourists being harassed. We're a very friendly, very open kind of country, but we have not been able to convey that to the world. People associate Pakistan with guns. People associate Pakistan with Afghanistan. We're worlds apart from Afghanistan. They have a completely different setup. We're a parliamentary democracy. They're an Islamic emirate.
But what you're trying to say, Omar, is that Pakistan needs to rebrand itself in a more aggressive manner as a country where foreign direct investment needs to be done and should be done, because there are multiple avenues available in our country for people to profit from the current situation, and not only will those companies, those organizations profit from the foreign direct investment, but also Pakistan directly and indirectly will profit from it and come out of this current situation that it is embroiled. Also, the international organizations need to invest more as far as the post-flood rehabilitation in Pakistan is concerned. There needs to be also an urgent operationalization of the funds for the post-flood rehab, especially the funds that have been announced very recently, the loss and damage fund in the COP27. A lot needs to be done, and I hope that the world listens to, because we have our foreign minister who's currently in the United States, and he is highlighting that with all the different leaders. So has Sharif Rahman, our Minister for Climate Change. Let's hope the world listens to, understands, and also let's hope that, as you said, Pakistan changes its strategy as far as its more aggressive policy for its rebranding is concerned. Thank you so very much, Omar Farooq, a policy analyst, to have joined us, to have talked to us on this very important subject, that is post-flood rehabilitation, and also the strategy that Pakistan needs to follow as far as coming back on its feet under the current circumstances that it is embroiled in. Thank you very much, sir. That brings us to the end of today's newsroom. This is Friday, so we'll see you inshallah on Monday with news story segments that pertain to us, you and Pakistan. Have a wonderful weekend and help those who are in need due to the floods and other issues as well. But help those who are in need, because that is how a society develops and a nation prospers. Allah Hafiz.